So this is, for me, a total double whammy. Because first off, culture is something, as anyone who works at RocketSpace knows, something I'm really passionate about, something I actually would probably confess to really struggling with. And there's nobody better to talk about that than, now this is on multi-levels. So RocketSpace started in January 2011. Razor arrived from Canada in March or April 2011. One of our first ever customers or members, just a small team from Toronto came down, 2 or 3 people. He then stayed with us while he was with us at the other building at 181 Fremont. We helped him get funding. I would love to say we helped him sell his company. We didn't. We had nothing to do with that. But he very successfully sold the company, and his company is actually all about culture. And that became violently apparent when we started to see some of the crazy stuff they used to do on their own little part of the second floor. They're the only people, and I'm not saying anyone can do this. They came in over the weekend, they painted their shit, they put up all sorts of stuff. I'm like, what have you done to our office? But that's where it all comes in. So Razor, first off, talk a little bit. The company was called I Love Rewards when you moved in.
Right.
Called Achievers when you moved out. Just give us the background of the company.
Yeah, so what started as I Love Rewards and now as Achievers is really a new way to motivate the millennial workforce, right? We knew that millennials work differently, thought differently about their relationship with the employer, and so our mission is to change the way the world works. And really think about what RocketSpace actually does in a physical workspace, we would do for company cultures. We would help you, we would want to kill things like the annual performance evaluation, right? Things that didn't make any sense that our boomer parents invented that we thought was a terrible idea, and we wanted to power the next generation of the workforce. And that's really what Achievers did. It was social software. It looked like Facebook. It looks like Facebook inside your company, and it's all about engaging employees, recognizing them for living their values, rewarding them for achieving their goals.
And were you, when you started the company, were you always this way inclined? Were you good at it from the word go, or?
So I can sit now and joke that the company that I started, I Love Rewards, was the worst company ever to work for. I can say undoubtedly in Canada, maybe in the universe, but that would be stretching it, but definitely in Canada, to the point in the summer of 2006, 1/3, we had about 18 employees, 1/3 of our employees quit that summer. And I was right with them. I'm like, I hate this place, right? We were working so hard, dropping so many balls, and it was an awful place. And I went into my my second in command, my CEO at the time, and I threw my keys across his desk in like dramatic Razor fashion. I'm like, I'm out of here. This place sucks, right? But he reminded me that I'm the founder, and I'm the reason this place sucks, and I need to fix it. And I didn't know how, but I knew it was broken. I knew the culture was awful. So we were the worst place ever to work for.
So I have hope. It gets better. No, it's a very good point, because I did, in our research for putting RocketSpace's culture together, and I was going, oh my God, the culture here sucks. This is terrible. We got to do something about this. And I came across this article that said 80% of the culture is the founder. And I'm like, so I suck.
You suck.
And
you suck.
Yeah.
I'm
like, maybe we shouldn't do this
just
culture
80% of you sucks. 20% are other environmental factors, but 80% of it is.
I'm a great party guy, but I'm just suck at being a founder. So talk me through that. How did you? I mean, obviously you came to this realization, and then you started to get serious about it. Right. What was the path that you went?
Yeah. So then I'm like, okay, is there anything really to this whole culture thing, right? And then you start to like read the data, right? We're all in tech. We're all about the numbers and the analytics, and it's clear that if you look at the most successful companies, they clearly outperform their competitors in the same industry, same businesses, right? You look at, every airline, right? The worst industry to ever invest in, statistically speaking, is the airline industry, right? Richard Branson had this great quote: if you want to be a millionaire, be a billionaire first and then buy an airline. Yet, Southwest is from a period of 1972 to 2002, a 30-year period, They are the most successful company on the planet in the worst industry, right? They have the same routes and the same jets and the same staff. They have the same environmental. When there's 9/11, they suffer as well with everybody else, yet they outperformed every Coke, Intel, Google. Southwest beat them all. So you're like, there's got to be something to this, right? And so then we started to study companies like them. We spent a ton of time at Zappos, like in the early days, and learning what Tony and Alfred, who then later, Alfred Lin, who's at Sequoia, led our $25 million round in bringing culture to the world. And we figured out what a call center, effectively, Zappos is generally a call center in a warehouse that ships shoes online, right? Think about the worst business model ever, right? How do you try shoes online? But they were crushing it. And so we just kept seeing example after example after example that great companies have great cultures, and if we wanted to be that, we had to figure this out.
And so where did you, and I should be taking notes now, but I spent a huge amount of time going through, I downloaded all these things of, hundreds of cultural points that companies have. I read the Netflix. There's a very good presentation by Netflix. There's another one out there by, I think LinkedIn has published theirs. Companies publish their culture mandate, and some of them are genius. They're just like, oh my God, if we could find employees that do all of these things, they'd be amazing. So how do you move from going, this is important, to actually doing something about it?
So I want to just clarify one thing. If we could find employees that did these things, right? You read the Netflix things and it's really clear. I would turn that around. If you could create, a culture manifesto that was so crystal clear of not the company you are, but the company you want to be, you will attract employees. They will find you, right? So I don't think you should wait to them for finding them, right? So how do you do that, right? How do you sort of figure out what the right culture is? Because you can't just take the Netflix document and then just slap a RocketSpace logo on it, right? I know you tried that strategy. It didn't work. Let's be honest. It didn't work. We tried that.
We can spend a bit more time on it.
Okay. But I feel like great cultures have great authenticity, right? They know who they are, right? Both the good and the bad, right? And cultures are a magnification of the founders, right? Or the founding team, the first 20 employees, right? So we started with 2 or 3, but then when we were, we're a Toronto-based company, and we raised some money, we moved to Silicon Valley, and the first 20 people I brought were the people that drank the Red Point, okay? That's our Kool-Aid, right? We're all about the purple and red. And it didn't matter what department you were in or what your functional expertise was. It's like, if you bled purple and red, you're coming on with me to this journey to go to California. And that's how we started, our San Francisco office. And then we painted and took over and just, put the cult in culture, right?
Yeah. But no, you did. But that's another, I noticed, and I came to a lot of those parties, but for 4th of July, you're a load of Canadians kicking your heels, going, because Canadians don't do 4th of July.
We don't celebrate your Independence Day. No,
exactly.
We don't do that.
And,
not even your Independence Day, my UK friend.
But yeah, you would have a 4th of July party, and the whole company would be there at your apartment.
Right.
And it would be messy.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's the other nuance about culture, right? We knew, well, I could take the craziest culture people from Toronto and bring them to California to help spawn the Silicon Valley culture. It couldn't be exactly like Toronto. Silicon Valley is not like Toronto, right? You needed to localize it, right, to make sure that it was relevant in that community, because our plan was then to hire a bunch of local people, and so they needed to be a part of the culture. So understanding the company culture and having local context, I think, was really important in our growth.
And I can remember, I don't think Mimi's here, but Mimi, who's still with the company, God bless her, but when she was my EA when I started, and she started saying about culture, and I said, Mimi, when we've got the money, we're going to kill culture. We're going to go in there and do it right. We're going to put this down like we should. But you have to, obviously, you have to start purposefully when you're 1 or 2 people.
So
And
just there's so many comments I have here. First of all, when we have the money, didn't somebody just raise $336 million? Like, how much money is enough for you to then think about that culture might be
I
important?
have a very
Was it $400 million? And culture
a
would be like,
very
ding ding. I
ambitious
now have
culture.
a budget for culture, right? Okay, so just pause. I'm gonna call bullshit on that, Duncan. Okay, we've known each other too
No,
long.
this is
We've known each other too
before
long.
this is before
okay?
we raised the money. But
Okay.
no, seriously, when we have a private jet culture. That's we're just aspiring to be there.
Yeah.
But when you know you I think we see it with a lot of the startups that come in here. And I
Yeah.
always say this to people, people say, "Oh, can you spot the unicorns?" or can you and there are companies that come in here that have put an enormous amount of focus on team events.
Yes.
And you guys did that.
Okay,
And
I'm gonna
it-
just stop. I'm gonna just stop you
I'm
because
teeing these up
I've
for you.
heard the word parties, and yes, we partied. Okay, I've heard the word team events and team building, and I want to change the conversation that culture is not about having beer on tap, a pool table, and a rollaway ping pong table, and having parties. Okay, that's like if you bought like the those dummies books like Cultures for Dummies. That would be the first 3 chapters.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's not what culture is.
Right.
Okay. To me, culture is the operating system. It's the DNA of a company, right? Not in its current state, but its future state of what it wants to be when it grows up. Culture is the seeds that you plant, right? The best time to plant an oak tree was 50 years ago. The second best time was today,
Yeah.
right? So being purposeful about what company you want to become is so much easier. We went from 18 to 12, right? It was easier to indoctrinate 12 people about the culture that I wanted to create than it would be to do it for what do we have now at RocketSpace? 100, 200 people?
Oh, as staff?
Yeah.
No. We're 65, 70.
Okay.
Like that. Yeah.
It's harder to change 65 people into a belief system than it is hard to change 12. So I think the earlier that you can start, right? And to me, there's a lot of tenets, right? There's a mission. What do we stand for at RocketSpace? Is it finding Class A buildings and renting them at the lowest possible price and then marking them up 2x to startups looking for flexible real estate? That doesn't seem that inspiring, okay? But is it, I'm making this up on the fly, right? Is it being the future of work, right? And the physical manifestation of what you do, right?
Sure.
And being that for the next generation of the workforce. I don't know.
Yeah.
You have to figure out why you exist. What's your purpose, Duncan? Why do you do what you do every day? And it's not rent.
All right, switch the cameras
okay?
off. This is
It's not.
No,
it's
and-
not
and-
rental price arbitrage. Okay.
no.
So that's
And-
one mission.
Right.
Values. You want me to get into values? Right.
What?
We've all seen companies that has anyone worked for a big company before? Right. And they have this like giant employee handbook that you have to sign in the first week of being there. Let's face it, it's a list of all the things that somebody fucked up on before you got there, and then they create a policy so that you wouldn't do it again. And they can tell you, I told you, right, that this is a bad idea at our company. Why do we need those things? Our employee guidebook literally is on the size of a business card. Right? Do what you would do if this was your company. That is literally our entire employee guidebook. And then follow the values. Because values are what people can identify with, right? They're the set of guiding principles in which we are going to conduct ourselves, right? It's who we are. We can't change the DNA of our belief system, right? Our values are entrenched in us. So that's the second tenet. I'm going to pause there before I give them all away.
No. Keep going. No, I mean, so obviously, like RocketSpace, we sat down and we went through, last year we went through and we produced 10 principles that we all could get behind and we bought into.
Give me 5 of them.
Okay, so act like an owner, speak straight, okay, continuous improvement, humor. Probably speak straight, continuous improvement, and you've put me right on the spot.
No, hold on. Come on, just name 5. 50%. It's
And
not even. It's
oh my
barely
God.
a pass.
Passion matters.
Passion matters. Okay, great. Now, who here works at RocketSpace? Who's on the payroll? I know you are. Okay. Can you name 6 through 10? What was it called? Okay. I'm going to stop the embarrassment here. That's my point, right? If it's not obvious, I think 3 is better than 5. 5 is better than 7, right? 10 is hard to remember, even if the founder and CEO can't remember them. How is anybody else in the room going to remember 10 values, right?
Right.
So being concise and clear, I think, is an important, as you guys are thinking about establishing your values, less is more.
Hands up in the audience who's defined their company values. What are name them? No. There you go. Okay. They've got a mnemonic. That's what I need
They're
to
cheating.
All right.
Okay.
I also, in my wayward approach of getting to culture, read that culture is not what you say it is, it's how you behave. So talk to me about how you guys kind of honed in on that. And
Right.
how did you influence that into your hiring and, more importantly, firing process?
Yeah, so I think, and culture, the other early mistake that I made is I thought that the culture would never change. It was actually in our original vision document, our master plan of who you were going to become. And that was completely false. Because the reality is, when we start to define it, it's at that moment in time, and then we hire people and we fire people and we promote people. So it literally is a living, breathing thing that does change as people change. And so culture needs to then evolve, because what the culture of RocketSpace was sub 20 people versus, north of 150 people. 150 people, when we get there, that's a whole other game, right? There's something about the number 150 that completely changes, human connection. So we're going to save that for the...
I can't wait to get
we're
there.
We're gonna save that for number talk 2, okay? Let's talk about it in the context of sub 150 people.
Yeah.
Right? So you brought up a really interesting point. So we got to the place that we were so committed to hiring against our values that when you applied for a position at Achievers, the first interview would be a cultural interview that was assigned to each value. We didn't care if you were like a 10Xer engineer, or like the brilliant jerk, or the rock star salesperson that everybody hated.
Yeah.
We wouldn't hire those people, because what we do in business is we tend to hire people for what they've done, and then we let them go for who they are. Right?
That's a good
We look at their resume,
Yeah, that's a good point.
right, of what they've done, 120% of goal, quarter after quarter, I'm going to hire you.
That's why Ron's here.
Right? And then we realize Ron's kind of a jerk, and nobody likes to work with Ron. Ron, I don't know you. I'm sorry. You might be an amazing guy. You're wearing purple, so I already appreciate that about you. You kind of look Canadian, so we're good, Ron. But I'm just saying, right? That's what we do. Then we're like, oh my God, what do we do? They're crushing quota, but we hate them. So why don't we change that? Why don't we bring people on that believe what we believe, right? That their DNA, right, their value system, who they are as a human being, has a strong degree of overlap of who we are at RocketSpace and our organization, because it's hard to change your DNA. It's hard to change your value system. I can teach you how to sell better. I can teach you how to code better, right? But there are things that I can't teach you, so let's interview for those things, right? And then invest in them over the long run, right, to make sure that they're going to grow into the company that we want to become.
Okay, and then if as must be the case, some people get in under the radar, and then start showing behavioral traits which don't fall into your culture.
Right. So we got 2 checkpoints of that, because you know what? We went from, this is how I used to hire, okay? So pre-summer of 2016 and post-summer of 2016 was different, okay? So pre-summer of 2016, I'm Canadian, so I play hockey, right? I know, stereotype, okay, God. So I'd play hockey, I'd meet someone that was a great right wing, we'd have a good time. I'm like, hey, you're unemployed. We're hiring in sales. right? Why don't you come work for us? This is a good idea. And that's how I would hire, right? You think that I have worse stories. Or I'd be out on a Friday night at a bar and meet some pretty girl who's also unemployed. That's just a bad idea. Don't hire at a bar, right? Don't do what I did before. Mike's laughing too hard. He's done this, right? You've done this, Mike. You know what I'm talking about, right? We've all thought about it. Don't play that card. That's a terrible way, and it'll get you in other trouble too. But anyway, post that, we went to become the most rigorous place. Like, we had a 7-step recruiting process. We started with cultural. We did technical interviews. We did top grading interviews. We did everything. And at the end, every different person met you. If all 7 people didn't unanimously agree that to these 3 questions, that you live our values, that you made our company, you're better, you're up top grading the talent, right? And you're going to help make our company great, and you didn't believe in the mission. If those 3 things weren't true by all 7 people, we wouldn't hire you. Right? But
you
people
purely hire to competencies around culture.
Strong cultural fit, which would be technical, which would be values, which would be believe in the mission, right? All of the components of culture, right? And then if all 7 of you said yes, we would hire you. But then we would have 2 other checkpoints, because we know that even with that rigorous process, we're going to be wrong, 20, 30% of the time. So the 2 processes, to answer your question. One happened at the end of the first week of Achievers Academy. It was our first week of onboarding. It's like orientation week at like a university, right? And so all of the department leaders come in, they tell you about the company. We wanted you to understand broadly what we do, not just functionally what you're responsible for. And in the last session of the last Friday, okay, Dave Brennan, our CFO, would come in, okay, and he's like classic CFO, accountant, cheap as fuck. And he would come in. And at the beginning, what you didn't know, we would ask you, like, we were a rewards recognition company, we'd ask you, like, what's your, like, wish thing? Like, what do you want, right? Bali vacation, the new iPad, whatever. You would tell us what you want at the beginning. All week we would source that. I mean, the company was called I Love Rewards, right? So we just played it up. And then on the last session at 4 o'clock, we'd have this Oprah moment, and we would give you everything that you ever wished for, okay? And then Dave, this is how the session would start, and you'd play with it, you'd touch it, you'd be like, oh my God, this is so exciting. And then Dave would start a presentation called The 10 Reasons Why You Don't Want to Work at Achievers. Why Achievers isn't right for you. And he would tell you, you'll never fucking work harder than you will work at this company, right? Often for less money that you can get elsewhere. We didn't mention that, right? And he would go through all, right? It's a startup, right? We all play the same game, right? Come on, okay? And then he would tell you 9 other reasons why you don't want to work here, right? He'd convince you to leave. And then he would say, look, you don't have to decide now. Take your favorite little thing that you were dreaming about home. Talk to whoever is that most significant other in your life, whether it be your wife, your roommate, your mistress, whatever. We didn't judge, okay? We're Canadian. Pot's going to be legal soon. Anyway, and he would say, you should share this experience with them. And if you don't want to come back here, like, we'll pay you for the week. You can take your favorite reward ever and no hard feelings. We're good. But if you do come back on Monday, right, you choose to take this job, you have to give up that reward, okay? You have to make a sacrifice. That's the opportunity cost, right? And, you're part of the team, okay? So that was step 1, okay? And we were pretty explicit about that this is well documented. But the thing that we don't tell people about, and this stays in the room, and whoever's watching online and wherever you'll broadcast it, but on day 80, okay, 80 to 85, before their 3-month probation period ended, I would sit down with the hiring manager, and I would look them in the eye, okay, Duncan, knowing what you know today about Michael, would you enthusiastically rehire him again for the same position? Duncan, would you?
Unfortunately, Mike, no.
Okay.
And how? And so what fallout rate did you have on those 2 steps?
Okay. So we did the gift thing like 400 times. Right, we started 10 years ago.
Give everyone an idea of the size of Achievers.
So when we came to California, there was maybe like 40, 50 of us. So not that unsized like of RocketSpace. And today there's maybe 300 people around the world, right? But we started early, right? We planted those culture seeds early. So in the 400 people maybe that we've hired since, and a third have left, right? So it's about 300-ish, let's call it. Only 2 people took the reward. So it's actually not a very good screening mechanism for people to opt out, okay? Oh, and by the way, if you think that what I'm telling you sounds familiar, it absolutely does. It sounds exactly like Zappos. Because one of our values at Achievers was R&D and innovate. Does anyone know what R&D stands for? Research and development? Christian, you would think for a tech company that would be bang on, that is absolutely wrong. At Achievers, R&D and innovate stood for rip off and duplicate. Okay? And innovate. Figure out who's smarter than you, who's already figured this shit out. Let's not reinvent the wheel. Let's start there, and then let's make it better. Okay? So we were very much into right? Good artists copy, great artists steal. That was all us, right? Steve Jobs taught the world a very valuable lesson, right? So there wasn't a very effective method. But what it did, though, is that it got people committed, right? You had an active conversation with whoever meant most to you, right? You made a sacrifice by giving something back, and you chose to be here. But at day 80 that nobody knew about, I would sit down, I would ask, and how it would normally go, they'd be humming, well, they're kind of good, and maybe bad. No, they're done. They're done. Because when you hire an A player, exactly. Every hiring manager knows. In the first week, the first month, I don't need to wait till day 80 to ask you this question. Yeah. And if you are not lit up, if you are sad, if this person is going to leave, right, the hardest thing in the world to do is let B players go, right? Good is the enemy of great. But we're going to build great people build great companies, and that's what we wanted to do. And so if they're not great, it would actually be a disservice, not to us to keep them along, but it would be a disservice to them because they're going to be great somewhere else, right? If they're a C player, maybe they're going to be great at our competitor, and we would recommend you to another job somewhere else. But we only wanted A's.
Can still be.
So to answer your question, I would say about 20% at that point we would let go before day 90.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's because the challenge, and we are going to go to questions. I see Sophie here, so think of your questions now. I'm going to ask one last question. The challenge when you're at a company and a startup, as RocketSpace is hiring is painful. And did you ever have? I mean, it's you can see candidate after candidate after candidate after candidate, and you're thinking, where's the A player? Go back and read you read the advert that you've put up and go, where are we getting these people from? And eventually you just go,
Okay. It's painful. Yeah. So in my personal belief, consistently hiring A players is the single hardest thing to do in business. Okay?
I would agree. Yeah.
It's not fundraising. We had a good story. We went out to do our Series C through Duncan's connections. We got a term sheet from Bain, Battery, Excel, and Sequoia, right? The best VCs in the world gave us $25 million. We got to choose. That wasn't actually that hard, right? Achievers is in 110 countries around the world. Millions of people use it. Building a product at scale wasn't actually that hard. I don't mean to sound arrogant, right? GM just bought a $20 million annual subscription for us for 162,000 employees, the largest SaaS deal in our industry. Wasn't as hard as consistently hiring A players. It's the hardest thing to do, and we all fail at it. But acknowledging that and having then things in place to course correct, because we needed that content writer, we needed that QA person, we needed someone to head up in media. We all have the urgency around hiring, and then we get desperate, right? And we settle. And when you start to settle, when you start, B's hire C's and C's hire D's, and then it's over, and you can't course correct at that point.
Okay, I'm going to the roof. Not at all. Okay, who?
And on that note, we'll take some questions from the audience. If you'd raise your hands, we'll bring the mic over to you. Does anybody have a question for Razor and/or Duncan?
Hi. So if we want to rip off and duplicate your culture, where do we go to find out more?
So the part that you left out was innovate. Okay? So you can take, we're kind of an open source culture. There's a lot documented around Achievers. If you're ever in Toronto, you're more than welcome to visit. We have a San Francisco office that you're more than welcome to visit. It's at WeWork. I'm really sorry. That wasn't my decision. It was after we sold the company. After we sold the company, I didn't decide that. So you can go to another place to find it. But you can get a lot online around it. And what I would do is I would try to focus on not what we do, but why we do it. Right? What are the principles about Achievers, right? So you can't really, I don't know what your business is, but maybe change the way the world works would be a terrible mission for your company. So you can't copy it per se, but you're like, wow, everywhere I go and everyone I meet understands the Achievers mission and why we exist, right? Their values seem to be entrenched in the people that we meet. We hug a lot at Achievers. Somebody commented on that today. You guys are the huggers, right? Yeah, yeah, right? It's who we are. And so you should figure out the elements, the principles of the culture, right? That whether it's Achievers or Zappos or any of these companies that really have figured it out early and then have invested in it, and then figure out what would ours be, right? What is our purpose of our company, right? What are the values that we all believe in that are ingrained in our DNA that I couldn't change if I wanted to, right? And then you should communicate ad nauseum. I talk about this topic all the time. Right? So that, I think you need to go through that journey and figure out what makes sense for you.
Any other questions from the audience?
Hey, so my name's Christian. Basically, the question is, it sounds like you guys take a roots first approach to this. And, if you were growing a tree, you want to start strong roots. What happens when the tree is grown, you get halfway up the stalk and it's a bunch of crap?
Yeah, then you sell the company and you just do talks about culture and,
It's when a third of the company walked out, you sold it.
Yes. I told you I made the mistake to think that our culture would never change. And then I focus on how do you scale culture, right? As startups, we think about scaling every aspect of our business, but we don't think about scaling culture. And to me, that's the most important because you deserve the culture that you have, right? And it's either by design or it's by default. You didn't think about it, care about it, left it, neglected. And now you have the shitty culture and you're like, what happened, right? So I would say be intentional about it. And if there is missteps, right, they're often related to people decisions that you made. And I would deal with the people aspect, right? And then try to get people back on track. And you know what? There are times that you're going to mess up, right? There was a retreat where we do a year in review. And we've had a really successful story. We went from idea in 2008 to 100 million revenue in 7 years, right? But along the way, there's a lot of F-ups. And I remember starting a year off where I hired a bunch of the wrong leaders because of who they were, not what they believed. And we let all of them go, which set us back that year. And I did a little reward and recognition card. It's who we are at Achievers. And on the cover of that card, it says, sorry, I effed, and it was like blocked out up, right? Because everybody in the company knew. Everyone knew that they were my hires, and I was wrong. And so we started that way. And it was a mea culpa. And so you are going to mess up. It's hard to navigate. We're all trying to change the world in some capacity with what we do, right? That's why we're here. No one has done what we're trying to do. So, of course, you're going to make mistakes, right? Particularly in scaling culture when you've never done it. So I think just be authentic. Right? Be aware, right? And then be awesome. I'm actually going to use those 3 A's in another talk I do. I just literally made that up on the fly.
Oh, yeah. So I was asked to stand up, actually. Sorry, you mentioned it's about value. But when diversity kicks in, especially when there's localization, you mentioned as well, how do you reconcile that to actually make sure because different people obviously have different values. Right. What do you commit to? What do you don't? How do you choose?
Yeah, so I think there's this whole new conversation about diversity, particularly in tech, right? We've been getting called out on it. I don't understand, right? As a visible minority who sees himself as more female on the inside, I'm kind of a unique animal that I'm thinking diversity is how we win. Right? In Canada, we call diversity our strength. So it's interesting that it's a dialogue now, but I think getting a value set in spite of all of our differences It's trying to figure out the things that we have in common, right? And I think that's why when I go by values in our DNA, not in our appearance, find the things that we both believe, right? And hire against those beliefs. So I think the more diverse your organization becomes, but the overlapping element of those people are values, I think you're crushing it. I think you're in the 90th percentile if you can figure out the balance of being diverse and having alignment on values.
Far away.
So appreciate this conversation and really appreciate the discussion about culture. So
I appreciate you appreciating me.
Thank
I
you.
feel really validated right
You
now.
guys wanna
Thank
hug
you.
it out?
Right? We can hug it out. Do you want to hug it out? Let's go hug it out. Come here.
all right.
We hug here at Achievers, right? Come on, right? Thank you. Okay. You have a question, or was that just a free hug? I've been
That's all
tricked
I
into
wanted
free
to say.
hugs. Okay.
That was it.
That's
Free.
it, we're
We could
done.
make money.
Anyway,
We
so
could make money off this. $10.
Literally, you could start an
$10
entire
hug.
company.
$10.
Right.
So if you were joining a new company and you were evaluating a few options and you wanted to kind of stack rank the leadership, the culture, the product, or your role, how would you prioritize that?
Good question.
Okay, that's a great question. I'm not the best person. The only companies I've ever joined are the ones that I've started. So, but I'm gonna imagine like you're ranking these core sets. So I think leadership and culture are more tightly correlated, right? So I think the leadership designs the culture, and so there, to me, I think you should think about it. Role, to me, doesn't matter at all because like the most successful people at Achievers, right, had 5 different jobs in 5 years, and it wasn't obvious where they would end up. But if you hire just really talented, really passionate people that live your values, believe in your mission, they can go anywhere. So to me, starting role of where you get into that company doesn't really matter. But I do think you should want to be your boss, right? If you're hiring for a sales role and you look at the head of sales and you're like, I want to be that guy, or I want nothing to do with that guy, I don't think you should.
You want to be that guy for their role, or for I want to be like that guy?
Like I think you should look up to, like if you're early in your career and you're like, wow, that guy's an amazing head of sales or the best CTO that I've seen. I'm going to learn a lot from him. Like he's further on the journey. I think when you're early in your career, there's no substitute for great mentors, people that'll take you under their wings, that you can really connect with and who will teach you. I think to me that's one of the most important things. And then the culture is really the accumulation of those leaders, right, and the company all together. But I think, we had an adage at Achievers, people join companies and leave managers, right? Employee engagement doesn't happen at a company level. It happens at a manager level. I spend most of my time not dealing with all of the employees. I focus on the leaders within my company, because the way that I treated the leaders is the way they treated their team. And the only way we could scale is if I got leaders that were better, functionally than I was, but at least on the same on the page with me around how important people are. Did I answer your question? Leadership drives culture. The rest, I think, is all optional. And you know what? It will change once you start. Get startup life. Hashtag startup life.
And do we have any questions on this side of the room? Any on the other side?
Well, hands up who here is a founder and the CEO. Okay, and hands up who? No, don't put your hands up. Who feels like they have not put nearly enough attention into culture in their business so far? That's pretty much everyone. Yeah, I would put my hand up there as well. But one thing we are very proud of here at RocketSpace is today we are actually more women than men in the company. We've been trying to keep it 50-50, and we're actually we are more. We're a fortunate company in Silicon Valley because we're not really a tech company. We're a lot of other things. We're not hiring a lot of coders, but it is something we're becoming super interested in. And what's fascinating about that is the number of people we tell that to, both male and female, who think that's amazing. And when you're in the interview and you say, "Oh, this is something we're becoming really conscious of," they're like, "Oh my God, you're the first company I've ever." So I do think it's a competitive advantage.
Yeah, our best leaders, and I say this to our males or our female leaders, right? I think the next century does belong to females. I think if you can bring them into your organization, bring you a whole different perspectives, I think that's a huge competitive advantage that we haven't taken advantage of enough.
All right, any more questions from the floor? These two, you're sitting
row,
at the front.
right?
You're sitting at the front. You're here. You've clearly got a culture issue.
Okay, Mike, go for it.
So what do you, when you encounter CEOs that feel that culture is a waste of time, that they should really focus on revenue or product, what's your argument to really win them over?
You know what? I don't try. So last night, I was doing, it's called the Hot Seat with Razor Suleman, where I interview CEOs, founder CEOs that have sold their companies for north of $100 million, right? Because once you get liquid, you're a lot more honest about what the shit really went down, right? Let's be honest. Because, like, let's face it, Duncan has customers, he has investors, he's got the media, right? He can only say so much shit. I don't care,
I've got a question about investors in a minute.
Okay. So that's why I always like to get them the moment they just got liquid, right? Because they'll tell me everything. And why I have tremendous amount of respect for this founder, him and I greatly differentiated on culture, okay? And so I'm not saying this is the be-all and end-all, because there are clearly examples of companies that are wildly successful that everybody has a culture, right? Whether it's intentional or not. So I'm not saying the typical Silicon Valley culture, right, is the right one for everyone, because there are many, many examples where they're not. And so I guess to answer your question is if they don't believe it's important, then I'm not going to spend my time trying to help enhance them or convince them it is, right? I'd rather talk to the people who believe what I believe. You all showed up here for a reason. There's no lack of places we can be right now where there are smarter speakers than Duncan and I, definitely better looking, right? And you chose to be here. So I'd rather spend my time with people who believe what I believe.
Yeah. Actually, so my question back to the investor piece. You know, when you're fortunate enough to have great product market fit, companies taking off on a tear, you have the choice of investors. How much of your culture did you emphasize to potential investors, and did you look for the culture in the investors, and that whole and how important, the investors look at this and they say, oh, here's a company that's really got a great culture and that's why we invested. Do you ever get that?
Yeah, so I'll tell you a story of the first VC we took money from. It's the first VC I ever met. I invited him. We do this.
This is you meet one VC, he invests.
Yeah. This may not work out exactly the
that's
same way, okay?
Now everyone's feeling like, what am I doing wrong?
Okay.
I've met 3.
That was kind of a douchebag statement. I take that. That wasn't my point of it, but I didn't know what VCs were, and I got to meet this guy, and he's an amazing Canadian VC. Anyway, so I invite him. So we do. Okay, if there's one thing that you take away, we haven't talked about it, okay? The silver bullet, the one thing, if you're going to do anything on culture, it's called a daily stand-up, right? It's where all your employees come all together and you talk about the business of your business. And you are wildly transparent. Anything that you want to know as a founder that you would share with your investors and your founding team, share it like radically transparent with the rest of your team. Nothing will change your culture when you treat them as a peer and equal, okay? So we do this meeting called To The Point, okay? It happens at 11:51, 9 minutes, all hands, every employee. We started with 14 employees. We now do it with 300 employees, right? We've never deviated, right? The agenda's changed. So I invited the investor to come in at 11 o'clock is when I would normally do it, because the meeting would end by 11:50. We'd walk over, the music would play, you'd go into TTP. And while the agenda is set every day, the content changes and somebody else is presenting it. And now look, my team's not dumb. Like, they played it up a little bit that the investors in there, I introduced them. It was like a really, really good version of our daily stand-up, okay? Lots of applauding, lots of high five, lots of good news, Okay, we gotta stack the deck here.
Everyone
okay,
hugging.
yeah, lots of hugging for sure. Okay, and it was like he was like enamored to the point that he was like, "Wow, I've never seen anything like this." And we're going back to like 2007. Okay, so I had to fly out to some meeting the next day. Okay, and John shows up at our office at 11:45, and he's like, "Am I in time for the daily stand-up?" And they're like, "No, you're 5 minutes early. Will you wait here?" And so he's sitting there thinking, "Oh, Razor just staged all of that, all of that." Okay. He goes through it. They do it. He sends me a text later. He says, "It was even better than yesterday." Right? He got it. And at that point, we didn't really fully understand how important mission, vision, culture all was to investors. And I'm not suggesting you do what I did. And we had a very unique trajectory, right place, right time. And we had the choice of investors. But if you wanted to be part of this, you had to get on a plane, cross a border, land in Canada, and be a part of that before we would even let you decide whether this was right for you. Because we know who we are, and you're not going to change us. So you either have the choice of being a part of this, right, or it's better that we just part ways now.
Pretty strong, yeah. So for a company, this wasn't always like this. The first couple of years, you talked about, a third of the team left. What resources did you go to, or did you find a mentor that brought this into you, or is this something you just read around and became passionate about, or?
So to finish that story of the sliding of the keys, my COO was like, you have this vision in your head of what it should be, this culture that we should be, but you don't communicate it to anybody, right? And so he wanted me to go home and write down our master plan and the company we would become and the culture we would become. And so he was about 20 years my senior. He had worked at software companies, a great human being. So I was lucky to have him as one of my early mentors around how to focus on culture and communication. And then once you start to see traction, and you see traction really quickly, like in 30 days, you start to see your organization change. I became like this culture magnet. Like I would go to everywhere. Anybody that had anything to say about this, I would become a sponge around this topic. Right? And then you just kind of suck up all of the data, right? And it really becomes who you are, right? Then you get to get talks at RocketSpace about culture, right? So it's an ongoing learning evolution.
Peak of your career.
This might not be that. No. No.
And while you were going through the growth years of Achievers, were you ever second guessing yourself around this? Were you ever? I mean, I think it's a kind of common thread for entrepreneurs and particularly people who are highly self-aware to be going, should we be doing more about this, or have we got this, or are people buying into this? Are people following me on this? Did you ever have those sort of niggling doubts, or?
Look, I had dozens of doubts every single day throughout the day, like all startup founders or early team members do, right? That is what the ride feels like, right? It is literally a roller coaster that is designed to have the loops to loops, the death drops where you think you're done, right? That was by design, and that's what startup feels like. But the one element when I learned that culture is a magnification of the founding team, and I didn't have any other co-founders, so it was largely myself and even my wife. My wife came up with the mission, changed the way the world works, did all the branding. So it was really the two of us driving this. When I knew that it was just me on steroids, I wasn't wrong about that, right? I knew exactly who I was and who I wanted to be. And so while I had doubts on did I pick the right investor, should we launch this product feature, do we do a user conference, I don't know, right? And I was wrong half the time. I just didn't know which half. I was never, once we figured out culture, we never wavered.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions from anyone out there? In that case, Razor Suleman, thank you very much.
Thank you, Duncan. This has been a pleasure.